Okay, let's unpack this. When most people think about effects pedals, they jump to the flashy ones.
Oh, yeah, the distortion, the chorus, maybe delay.
Exactly, the ones that really roar or swirl. But there's this quiet hero on the modern pedal board, one that really dictates the feel, the consistency.
And the sustain, right, that endless hang time.
That's the one. The compressor. And it's not just about leveling out volume, is it? It's more fundamental.
Absolutely. It's dynamics processing. It helps those quiet notes bloom, make sure the loud ones don't disappear too fast. It's kind of the engine room of your tone, even if it's often the most, let's say, misunderstood effect on the board.
Right. Because without it, things can get messy. A clean note might just vanish, or a subtle lick gets totally lost.
Yeah, but with it, everything just sounds articulated.
Yeah.
Powerful, consistent.
And if you want to trace the history of putting that kind of studio power into a little stomp box, making it affordable, making it accessible, well, one name just keeps coming up.
BOSS. And specifically, the CS series.
Precisely. Which is why today we're doing a deep dive into that foundational BOSS CS line, the compression sustainer.
We're starting right at the beginning with the CS1, then looking at how it evolved into the more refined CS2, and finally landing on the one that's still around today, the CS3.
Our mission here is to see how BOSS didn't just make a compressor pedal. They really pioneered bringing that studio-level dynamics control right onto the pedal board. They kind of defined an era.
And the sources we're looking at, they detail these really fundamental shifts, changes in the circuits, the knobs you could turn, the actual sound you got out of them. It's like an evolution in 3 acts.
Yeah, it really is.
And it's a perfect case study, I think. It shows this constant balancing act the industry does. You've got the desire for that vintage warmth, that organic musical thing.
Right, but feel.
Versus the modern need for precision, consistency, low noise, and giving the player total control. So yeah, let's set the stage. How did BOSS solve that need for clean, endless sustain?
Okay, let's start at the beginning. The genesis. CS1 compression sustainer. It landed in 1978.
It had a pretty short run, actually, only about 4 years until 82, but incredibly influential years.
It was BOS's first compressor, right? Putting dynamics control firmly in that compact pedal format.
Yeah, and you got to understand, the CS1 wasn't just another pedal. It was like a statement. Before this, getting good compression usually meant bulky rack gear, expensive stuff.
Or maybe some obscure DIY thing.
Exactly. The CS1 brought that studio idea, smooth, clean sustain, to everyday musicians. It was aimed mostly at players needing consistency, especially with clean tones where every little inconsistency just jumps out at you.
And the core of its sound, the thing that gives it that warm, almost legendary character now, is its internal architecture.
Mm-hmm.
It was built around an analog optical circuit.
That's the key detail, optical compression. It's fundamentally different from what came later. It uses something called a photocoupler.
Okay, break that down. Photocoupler.
It's basically 2 parts sealed together. An LED, a little light.
Light-emitting diode.
Yep. And an LDR, a light-dependent resistor. A resistor whose resistance changes based on how much light hits it.
So how does that actually compress the guitar signal?
Well, your guitar signal comes in, and it makes that internal LED glow. The louder your signal, the brighter the LED shines.
Yeah.
That light then hits the LDR. And the brighter the light, the lower the LDR's resistance gets. That lower resistance then turns down the signal's gain. So the compression is literally handled by light, a physical reaction.
Wow. And that immediately connects it to some really high-end classic studio gear, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge part of why the CS1 is still so sought after. When you hear optical compression, you think of things like the Teletronics LA2A, big, often tube-driven units.
Right, those legendary compressors.
Now, the CS1 is solid state, not tube, but the basic idea, light controlling the compression, is similar. It gave you a taste of that warm, musical studio sound in a little box. Optical circuits tend to react a bit slower, maybe more non-linearly, organically than pure electronic methods.
That slower and nonlinear part sounds key to the feel, but the controls on the outside were dead simple.
Super simple, just 2 knobs. Level for your overall output volume, and sustain, which basically controlled how much squeeze you applied and therefore how long the note rang out.
And what's really striking is what wasn't there.
Right. No attack control. That's crucial. The attack time, how fast the compressor grabs the note, and the release time, how fast it lets go, were fixed, baked into the circuit design.
That seems like a bold move for a dynamics pedal. You just get what they give you.
Well, the idea was simplicity. Plug and play. They optimized the timing for guitar, aiming for something generally musical for rhythm and lead playing. You set the amount of compression with sustain, and the unique kind of flow optical circuit did its thing with the timing. That's part of why it feels so organic. The speed is tied to that slightly sluggish, smooth way the light reacts.
And the sound people describe is smooth,
Mm-hmm.
natural, maybe a bit colored.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't meant to be an aggressive in-your-face effect. Think about who used it. Clean funk players needing every strum to be perfectly even.
Country chicken pickers needing that super articulate snap.
Or lead players wanting notes to hang forever in a ballad without getting thin or distorted. That gentle, nonlinear optical squeeze was perfect for that foundational sustain.
Now, you mentioned how compression can sometimes darken the tone. The CS1 actually had a way to deal with that, didn't it? A little switch.
It did. The mode switch. You could choose normal or treble emphasis.
Why the treble mode? What was that solving?
It's a classic compression problem, really. When you squash a signal hard, you reduce the peaks, and often the result sounds duller, darker, you lose some high-end sparkle.
Yeah, the sound gets kind of muffled.
Exactly. So the treble mode was the CS1's clever fix. Flick that switch, and it actively boosted the high frequencies. It put the brightness back in. Super useful if you were using, say, darker humbuckers or playing through an amp that rolled off the top end naturally. It helped the compressed sound cut through.
So it's a classic, revered pedal. But being pioneering tech from '78, it wasn't perfect, right? What were the drawbacks?
Well, compared to later pedals, it definitely had a noticeable noise floor. You'd hear some hiss, especially if you crank the sustain. But maybe the most interesting drawback, which collectors actually love now, is the optical cell itself.
You mean how they age?
Precisely. Those photocoupler parts, especially the LDR, they change over decades. They don't react exactly the same way now as they did brand new. So two vintage CS1s side by side might sound subtly different. It gives them this unique, slightly unpredictable vintage character. It's a cool quirk of its physical, light-based design.
So the CS1 really put BOSS on the map for dynamics, defined that clean, warm sustain for the compact pedal world. But relying on those unique, sometimes aging parts and lacking that attack control, it set the stage. But BOSS obviously knew they needed to evolve, and faster.
Oh.
Right, that short 4-year run of the CS1 takes us straight to phase 2. The CS2 compression sustainer came out in '81, ran till '86.
And the fact they replaced the CS1 so quickly tells you something. The market, or maybe the engineers themselves, wanted more precision, more consistency than that optical circuit could really deliver reliably at scale.
So this wasn't just a tweak. It was a major overhaul under the hood.
Monumental. They completely ditched the optical photocoupler thing, moved entirely to an analog VCA design, voltage-controlled amplifier.
VCA. Okay, that sounds more electronic, less reliant on light bulbs.
Exactly. If the CS1 was like controlling volume with a light dimmer smooth, but maybe a bit slow and variable, the VCA is like a super fast, precise electronic switch. The gain reduction is controlled directly by a voltage signal, not by physical light.
And what did that VCA approach actually give them? What were the benefits?
Consistency, speed, and precision. Those were the big wins. And crucially, it allowed for much more consistent mass production.
So every CS2 off the line would behave much more predictably than the CS1s.
That's the idea. The VCA circuit used a specific integrated circuit, an IC chip, usually the NE570 or 571, called a compander to handle the gain reduction. This chip gave a much more linear, predictable response than the optical cell ever could. The compression was faster, more reliable, unit to unit.
Okay, hang on. Compander. That sounds technical, but you said it's key, especially for noise.
Yeah, it's a clever bit of engineering. Compander is short for compressor expander. It's a noise reduction trick.
How does it work?
On the way in, the circuit acts as a compressor, squashing the dynamic range like you'd expect. But then after the main circuit noise is introduced, but before the signal goes out, there's a complementary expander circuit. This restores the original dynamic range.
So compressing then expanding cancels out the noise.
Because the hiss, the noise inherent in the analog circuit, gets added between the compression and expansion stages. When the expander pushes the dynamic range back out on the output, it also pushes that noise floor way down, along with the quiet parts of the signal. So the audible result is a much quieter pedal, a massive improvement over the CS1. That NE570 571 chip was a real game changer for compact pedals.
Okay, quieter, more consistent, faster. And the VCA allowed for more control too, right? They kept level and sustain, but added something crucial.
They added the attack knob. This is where the CS2 really steps up from just being a sustainer to being a proper dynamic shaping tool.
With the CS1, the attack was fixed. You got what you got.
Exactly. With the CS2, you get to control how the pedal reacts to the very start of your note, the initial transient.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for the player. How does fiddling with that attack knob actually change the feel?
It's all about that initial pick sound. You know, when you hit the string, there's that tiny, super loud peak, the click or thwack before the note really rings out. That's the transient. A fast attack setting tells the VCA to clamp down almost instantly. It grabs that peak right away. The result is a very compressed sound, that tight percussive pop. Think classic country snap or really tight funk rhythm, that rubber band kind of sound.
You're squashing the initial hit for maximum evenness.
Pretty much. Now, dial in a slow attack. The VCA waits just a little bit before kicking in. That lets the initial pick transient punch through before the compression starts working on the body of the note.
Ah, so you keep more of the initial impact.
Yeah. It gives you a smoother bloom or a more natural swell. It feels less processed, less squashed right at the start. Lead players often like this, or bassists who want that initial attack to really cut through but still want the sustain afterwards. That one knob let you tailor the compression's feel to your style, your instrument, your genre. It was huge.
So the overall sound was still smooth, still sustaining, but with more punch, more precision than the CS1.
Definitely. It was very musical, very responsive, still great for clean rhythm, but the added precision, the attack control, and crucially, that lower noise floor made it a hit with bass players too. It could control the low end without making it sound mushy.
But okay, the CS1 had that optical warmth, trying to mimic those classic studio units. Didn't moving to the VCA chip lose some of that magic? Was there a tone of trade-off people noticed?
Oh, for sure. There was a trade-off, but for many, the gains in control and low noise were worth it. The main thing people point to is that the CS2 generally sounds a bit darker than the CS1.
Okay, how so?
The VCA components, while precise, didn't quite have that same subtle high-frequency sparkle or unique coloration that the optical circuit naturally provided. It was a cleaner, maybe slightly more neutral sound, but could lack a touch of that CS1 air or warmth. But again, for studio guys or anyone building a complex rig, the attack control and the quiet operation made the CS2 the more practical professional tool.
And its reputation is kind of legendary, right? Especially the CS2.
Oh, yeah. It became a staple in Nashville, you know, essential for that clean, consistent chicken picking. And it was all over 80s pop and rock records. A lot of tone hounds still say the CS2 is the best-sounding analog BOSS compressor ever made. It just hit this perfect balance, maybe, between VCA control and musical character.
A real sweet spot. But even that legend didn't stick around forever. 5 years later, BOSS replaced it again, leading us to the one that's still with us. Which brings us to Act 3, the CS3 compression sustainer. Launched in 1986, and it's still in production today. That's almost 4 decades.
That longevity says it all, really. It means BOSS finally landed on a formula, a mix of features, reliability, and price that just worked for a massive number of musicians worldwide. With the CS3, they weren't trying to reinvent the wheel again. It was more about refining and modernizing what the CS2 had started.
So architecturally, they stuck with the VCA approach, still based on that Compander chip idea.
Yeah, fundamentally, it's still an analog VCA design, likely using an updated version or implementation of that NE570 Compander philosophy. The core technology remained the same as the CS2.
Okay, so if the basic circuit type didn't change, what did they improve? What were the engineers focusing on this time around?
Two main things, it seems. Making it even quieter and giving it a bit more clarity, maybe through extending the frequency response. The CS3 is noticeably quieter than even the CS2. Less hiss.
Which would have been increasingly important by the late 80s, right? People stacking more pedals, using higher gain.
Exactly. Noise just accumulates in a signal chain. So getting the inherent hiss of the compressor down even further was a big goal. They engineered more of it out.
But the really obvious change, the thing players interact with, was adding that final knob to the controls.
The tone control, yep. Alongside level, attack, and sustain, you now had tone. This was really the last piece of the puzzle for complete tone shaping within the compressor itself.
And this feels like a direct answer, maybe a more flexible answer, to what the CS1 tried to do with that simple treble switch.
That's absolutely the connection to make. We talked about how heavy compression can make things sound dark, dampening the highs. The CS1 had that on-off treble boost. The CS3's tone knob gives you variable, continuous control over the high frequencies after the compression happens.
So you can dial in exactly how much sparkle you want to add back in, depending on how much you're squashing the signal.
Precisely. If you're really cranking the sustain, maybe using humbuckers that are already a bit dark, you can turn up the tone knob to add brilliance and articulation back into the sound. Keep it from getting muddy.
Or the opposite, if you have really bright single coils, maybe you dial the tone back a bit to keep it smooth.
You got it. It lets you fine-tune the EQ voicing of the compressed signal in a way the older pedals just couldn't. It's incredibly useful.
And that flexibility must be why it's lasted so long. It covers a lot of ground.
That's its superpower. Versatility, set the sustain low, keep the tone moderate, and it's just subtle leveling. Great for acoustics or keeping clean rhythm parts really consistent without sounding obviously compressed.
But you can also crank it.
Oh yeah. Crank the sustain, maybe boost the tone, adjust the attack for snap, and you get that super squashed pop and clamp sound. Classic country, classic funk. But because you have both attack and tone controls, you can make sure it still cuts through and doesn't just sound like mush.
It really became the utilitarian workhorse. Does
Yeah.
guitar, does bass, meets the needs of the masses.
Totally. But we have to talk about the critiques, right? The things tone purists sometimes say when they compare it to the beloved CS2.
Yeah, the common knock is that it sounds maybe less musical
Mm-hmm.
or a bit sterile compared to the CS2.
That's the gist of it. While the CS3 is undeniably cleaner and quieter, the sources often mention its mid-range response. It's perceived as being slightly scooped in the mids compared to the flatter, maybe punchier mid-range of the CS2.
Scoop mids. Why would that be? Just component choices.
Likely choices made back in '86, yeah. Maybe prioritizing that ultra-low noise and clarity over maintaining that specific mid-character of the CS2. The result is that, especially if you push the compression really hard, the CS3 can sometimes sound a little artificial or synthetic. It might lose some of that natural punch the CS2 is famous for.
But clearly, for most players, the advantages, the reliability, the fact you can find one anywhere, the low noise, and having all four of those controls outweighed any subtle mid-range differences.
Massively outweighed them. The CS3 became and remains a cornerstone. It defines the modern Bauhaus compressor sound for millions of players globally. Its incredible run proves they hit that sweet spot of control, performance, and value for the mass market. It took compression from just being about sustain to being about actively sculpting your dynamics and your frequency response.
Okay, so we've walked through these three pedals. Three distinct designs, spanning almost 50 years if you count the CS3's ongoing run. They really map out different eras of dynamic control. So let's zoom out. What's the big picture here? How did the DNA evolve from '78 to today?
It's a fantastic little history of solid-state audio tech right there in three blue boxes. You can clearly trace the shifts in the core technology, the user controls, and what musicians were demanding at each point.
Let's start with the core architecture, that journey from light to voltage.
Right. CS1, 1978, that was analog optical. Key characteristics: warmth, organic feel, maybe a bit nonlinear, but the downsides were fixed timing, potential inconsistency between units, and noticeable noise.
Then came the big pivot.
CS2, 1981. Switched entirely to analog VCA using that NE570571 Compander chip. This brought precision, speed, consistency unit to unit, and a much lower noise floor. A huge step up in predictability.
And the CS3 refined that VCA approach.
CS3, 1986 present. Stayed with VCA, but focused on optimizing it further, pushing for the best possible frequency response, maximum clarity, and the lowest noise floor they could achieve at the time.
And that move from optical to VCA wasn't just about the sound, was it? It was huge for manufacturing.
Oh, absolutely. Those optical cells in the CS1, they could vary. They aged differently. Moving to the VCA and the integrated circuit meant BOSS could churn out pedal after pedal that performed reliably and sounded virtually identical. It was key to making the compressor a truly mass-market, dependable utility pedal, not just a quirky vintage effect.
Okay, so architecture dictates the core sound and consistency. What about the controls? How did the player's ability to interact change?
That's where you really see the evolution of empowering the musician. The CS1 was minimal. Level and sustain, that's it. You accepted the timing and the inherent tone.
Pretty limited by today's standards.
Then the CS2 added the game changer.
The attack control.
Right. Suddenly you could control the timing. You could shape how fast the compression grabbed the note. Decide if you wanted that sharp pop or that softer bloom.
Huh.
That fundamentally changed how people used compression. It wasn't just sustain anymore. It was dynamic shaping.
And the CS3 completed the set.
Added the tone control. Now you had frequency shaping after the compression. You could brighten it up, smooth it out, tailor the final EQ.
So the progression was level sustain only on the CS1.
And level sustain attack on the CS2, giving timing control.
And finally, level sustain attack tone on the CS3, adding frequency control.
Exactly. It's not random. It's engineers responding to what players needed and what the VCA technology enabled. By the CS3, you had a mini studio dynamics processor. Control over volume, amount of compression, timing, and EQ. It moved from organic simplicity, CS1, to controlled precision, CS2, to comprehensive flexibility, CS3.
Each one really defined sustained perfection for its time, didn't it? Balancing the sound, the noise, the control, all within the limits of the tech available then.
For sure. The CS1 gave you that warm optical feel, but you paid for it with noise and rigidity. The CS2 nailed that balance of punchy VCA control and low noise, becoming a classic sound of its era. And the CS3 just delivered maximum versatility and quiet operation, making it the enduring standard for players who need total control over everything. Hashtag outro.
So this deep dive really lays it out. 3 distinct chapters in the BAW SS compression story. The foundational, warm, optical CS1. The punchy, controlled, VCA-based CS2, and the super versatile, still going strong CS3. Hopefully, understanding this evolution helps you, the listener, figure out what kind of compression fits your sound best. Are you chasing that vintage optical vibe, or do you need the clean, flexible control of the modern standard?
And that key moment, that pivot in the early 80s from optical to VCA, it's huge. Moving from the CS1's unique, sometimes quirky, aging light cell to the precise, predictable VCA chip in the CS2 was arguably the defining step in making compressors reliable mass-market tools. But it's interesting.
What's that?
Well, the VCA offered all that control, especially the attack knob and low noise, but it inherently didn't have the same subtle color as the optical unit. So BAW SS eventually had to add the tone knob on the CS3, partly to let players dial back in some of that brightness and clarity that maybe got lost in the shift away from the optical design's natural character.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. Imagine noise wasn't an issue. If BAW SS could wave a magic wand and make that original 1978 CS1 circuit totally silent, would that organic warmth, that slightly slower, unique optical reaction, would that still be the ultimate ideal for analog compression today?
Or has the precision, the linearity, the sheer speed and control offered by the VCA lineage fundamentally changed what we even expect a compressor to do now?
It's that classic audio dilemma, isn't it? Warmth and character versus precision and control.
Exactly. And the answer probably depends on what kind of music you play, what kind of feel you're going for. Is it the beautiful accident of light controlling sound or the predictable certainty of voltage? Something to think about.